7 overly specific Hearthstone cards. The first card on our list is the poster child behind this idea, Shadow Word Forbid. Shadow Word Forbid is the perfect card to illustrate what I am talking about in this video. It is the perfect card that you look at and you go, what? Why? Alright, let's take a chill pill for a second, because obviously there is very important, very impactful, very reasonable explanatory context for why this card exists. Without any backstory though, just on its own, it is a card that destroys only 4 attack minions, and unless you corrupt it, it's only a single 4 attack minion. So most games, most of the time, this card is in your hand and you just cannot play it. And even when you can, it's rarely that good. And most of the time, even when you corrupt it, by the time you can actually play it, you're still only hitting 1. You just don't have to bother dragging the mouse to the card. This is the perfect card for this video because it is entirely flavor. This card is like kind of the definition of a pack filler, but pack filler generally means like weaker vanilla type minion that you'd kind of generally only experience in arena, whereas this card is created more for like the flavor, the meme almost, right? For those who don't know, Shadow Word cards are a thing since Priest's early days. There is Shadow Word Death, that used to be 3 mana and is now 2. Destroy a minion with 5 or more attack, right? This card compared to Shadow Word Forbid, insanely good. You get to destroy any minion 5 or more with a 2 mana spell. Any big minion you dislike, put it to death with Shadow Word Death. Similarly, they also have Shadow Word Pain, which destroys a minion with 3 or less attack. These two cards, while they may say, that one may say core, Shadow Word Death says legacy, these are both cards that came out when Hearthstone came out. They are both classic legacy cards. And so the reason Shadow Word Forbid is all flavor and is all for the meme is because this 2 cards destroyed 3 or less and 5 or more. So they hit every mana attack in the game except 4, which during Classic, prominent 4 attack minion showing Yeti, not necessarily busted or anything, but it like saw played. There wasn't a lot of options. It's decent stats for the cost. It's like, okay, right? You'd see some Yetis. And it was always a funny thing when you'd see a Yeti, or more realistically, you'd see like an Azure Drake, and Priest would have no way to kill it because they can only destroy 0 through 3 or 5 or more. So Shadow Word Forbid is entirely a meme calling back that. There's even a Yeti in the art of this card, and the flavor text, of course, is at last, Priest has no more weaknesses. This card is like, as far as I can tell, really only designed for the flavor, for the meme. The only reason it's competitively like capable or like reasonable at all is because it is tradable on it. They're like, yeah, people are going to play this card. They're probably not going to play it even with tradable, but at least if we add tradable, if it shows up, it's like an actual playable card. And so people can experience this meme in more than just their collection. But obviously, context aside, this card is extremely overly specific. This card will see no play and will be very bad unless you for some reason want like every tradable card imaginable, or for some reason you're destroying your own 4 attack minion. And so like 2 mana is like pretty efficient for that if you have some weird combo going on, but otherwise it is way too oddly specific. Next up, we have Crimson Expanse. Crimson Expanse is a warrior / demon hunter location. Choose a damaged minion. Summon a copy of it that goes dormant for 1 turn. So it's kind of like Faceless Manipulator, but like as a location. But if it just read choose a minion, summon a copy of it, you would then be able to like preemptively cheat out your Faceless Manipulator, and it'd be really strong with things that have charge because you could activate the location immediately and you could have 2 chargers. So every time you play a Leroy or something, you'd have 2 of them because you could just play this before. So obviously they had to do something to the card to make it weaker than that if they wanted to keep the mana cost low. However, the card that they've ended up with here, because it's a dual class card, I guess, or maybe just they had to, who knows, choose a damaged minion. Okay, the damaged requirement comes from the flavor of like Enraged Warrior because it's a warrior card, but then summon a copy of it that goes dormant for 1 turn. I don't know if like dormant because of like the, you know, antenna of the world and like the Magtheridons or something, if like dormant is supposed to be like kind of a demon hunter thing now. I don't really see it that way. I think they just threw another weird like keyword prerequisite requirement on this card, which is a little weird. So now you have to have it be damaged, and when you get a damaged minion you like enough, you still have to wait a turn with it dormant before you get it, which makes the card really specific and really quite odd because you can't just copy stuff and you don't just get it. You have to have it be damaged and you have to wait. I think this card still saw some play. So it's very fair to say that this card needed multiple kind of things to weaken it, right? Damaged and dormant. But otherwise, like if there was any world where it wasn't like still really good, it's just so odd to have both of those options. Currently, Crimson Expanse is a terrible card. According to HS Replays, its deck win rates in the last 7 days is below 40%. It's seeing play at almost nothing. It's very, very, very bad. I don't know what it was like at its peak, but my guess is it's like you're hoping for 50% in something at some point and haven't really gotten it because it's just really to Overly Specific. Next up, we have a card that is no stranger to this channel. We have Light's Champion. Light's Champion is a 3-mana 4/3 minion that says Battle Cry, silence a demon. Not silence a minion, not silence your opponent from talking, silence a demon, specifically a demon. And this card came out in the Grand Tournament. So this is before any of the big Demon Hunter support that the Warlock class would later see very recently after this time frame, and obviously way before big demon stuff in Demon Hunter. And what's also just really strange about this card is that it came out in a time where Ironbeak Owl existed. Now, Ironbeak Owl could silence anything with 3 mana. Granted, it was too strong at 2 mana, to be fair. They had to nerf it to 3 mana. So I guess with this card, they were just like, yeah, let's just like make it a demon only, but then it's still like kind of not that good of stats. Like, this is just like a TGT card in a nutshell. Like, it doesn't do anything and the stats are bad. Like, great, cool. And what's really funny is the reason this has seen the light of day on this channel before is it's holding Sulphurous, which is a World of Warcraft legendary weapon and the reward of Fireplume's Heart. This is like an iconic World of Warcraft weapon, and some just random dudes holding it in this useless, unplayable card, which is pretty funny. But yeah, ultimately silencing a demon, not really something you're ever going to do. You'd just rather run a card that silences any minion. The stats aren't good enough. The cost isn't good enough to justify ever playing this as a tech card ever. It's just really bad and really overly specific. Next up on our list, we have Death Axe Punisher. Death Axe Punisher is one of the quintessential meme cards in Hearthstone. It is a card you think of when someone says, hey, show me a fake card. Hey, show me an unplayable, terrible card. Show me a card you did not know existed. This is the card that you show. Unless, of course, people know it exists now because of how many times that has happened. Death Axe Punisher, 4 mana, 3/3 Battle Cry. Give a random lifesteal minion in your hand +2/+2. This card is bizarre. You're not buffing a minion, just generically, you're not buffing a weapon. You're buffing specifically a lifesteal minion. Like, you could argue that sometimes lifesteal is an upside because it allows you to like target a minion with the buff, but in reality, what it actually means is this card is never active and doesn't function. And it's a 4 mana 3/3, so if you just don't have a lifesteal minion in your hand, and there just weren't enough when this card was printed, and even today there aren't enough, the card just ends up being really, really bad and really, really unplayable. And what's funny is a card like Grimy Gadgeteer, granted, this is a class card, so it's not super comparable, but it's better stats, cheaper cost, and at the end of your turn, give a random minion in your hand +2/+2, so you only need a minion for it to activate, whereas Death Axe Punisher you have to spend more for. You only get it once, and that has to be specifically a lifesteal minion in your hand, which makes the card really hard to play. If you just do a quick search for random minion in your hand, we'll see a lot of things that hand buff. This is a 2 mana card here. Battle card, give a random minion in your hand +2/+2, so it's any minion, doesn't have to be a lifesteal minion. This is a 2 mana card that does it at the end of every turn in Stereo Totem. It's just like crazy to me that you have to spend 4 mana and you can only hit a lifesteal minion. Like, I don't understand it. Like, if they had a specific lifesteal minion in mind, they must have, right? There must have been like, hey, lifesteal's a new mechanic. We've got this cool lifesteal minion. Let's give a way to make it stronger, to like make it line up with something. But why is this card 4 mana? What lifesteal minions were we hitting back then? Like, it's just so strange to me. Like, if we do a search for lifesteal and we go to Knights of the Frozen Throne, I'd be surprised if we see anything besides this card. Like, what are we doing? Are we buffing Dreadscale Knight? Bloodworm? Like, what are we doing? This is a Rexar card. This isn't real. If we look in the classes, it's like, okay, maybe the idea was Paladin would play it, like a neutral card just for Paladin. But Paladin is a hand buff class. They have the more effective hand buff cards in their class, so they're not going to use that card. Are you buffing Obsidian Statue? Like, because it's expensive, so it's going to be in your hand a while? So you're like Death Axe Punishing it? Like, that doesn't make any sense. So that's going in big breeze, because you printed Shadow Essence around the same time, right? Like, what are we doing here? You tell me Warlock is going to discard cards and then buff their Blood Queen Lanethel? Like, maybe the true synergy is that if you discard Death Axe Punisher, it's actually a high roll, even though there are cards that actually have benefits when you discard them. It would still be advantageous to discard Death Axe Punisher because this card's unplayable. Like, what are we doing here? A 4 mana 3/3 Battle Cry, give a random minion in your hand +2/+2 is unplayable. It's horrible. It's so weak. What are we doing making it a lifesteal minion? Like, it's gotta be for the reason that it's like targeted, but that just doesn't, that's not enough of an upside to justify the rest of the card. This card is just so weird. It is so overly specific, and that is why it is on this list. It is a cool card though. It's got the Arcanite Reaper and the flavor text to match, I guess. Pretty cool little deal there. Pretty cool little deal. Look at it go. Same weapon, 2 places. Next up, we have EMP Operative. 5 mana 3/3 Battle Cry, destroy a mech. It's your pretty, it's your standard stereotypical tech card, kind of like Light's Champion, but instead of silencing, you're destroying. It's like there are cards like these that like destroy a tribe card that are actually good and popular. Case in point being Galactic Crawler. But Galactic Crawler targets like the strongest aggro class in the game, the strongest aggro tribe in the game rather, and it costs 2 mana, whereas this costs 5. And in terms of ladder's population, targets an extremely sparse tribe. Like, sure, this is a mech expansion that came out in the Boomsday project with other mechs. There are big mechs that came out in that expansion. But even then, you're not going to spend a 5-mana 3/3 destroying any of those mechs. That's just so strangely specific and did not need to exist. This is the kind of card you should print like an expansion after or in a mini set, which I guess didn't exist at this time, but like you print once there's a problem, maybe printing it with it's just like, even with the context of the expansion it's in, this card is just weird. It's overly specific and it does not have the stats or the mana to justify it. But I guess maybe the devs were scared of Ziliax going on big things like, I don't know, bulldozer or big missile launcher magnetic things, and so EMP and Operative was like a neutral way to deal with these threats in all classes. Like war gear and anything is suddenly big enough that you're like, okay, I want an EMP Operative in my deck. I don't buy it one bit, but I guess that's why it's that specific. It's just odd. It's an odd card. I think I could probably include the entire TGT expansion in this video, but for now we'll just talk about Argent Watchman. Argent Watchman is a 2-mana 2/4 with the words can't attack. Inspire can attack as normal this turn. So essentially, you're paying 2 mana. Demon Hunter isn't real. You're paying 2 mana in order to be able to attack with this card. That's the text. It's like, okay, you get a 2-mana 2/4, but you can't attack unless you're hero powering. So you have to pay 2 mana to attack as normal. That's all you get for being forced to hero power. And the upside is you get a massive 1 health addition over something like River Crocolisk. And this isn't even a beast, which has some value. So this card is just like doo-doo garbage and could be a vanilla minion, but is instead a card that you have to spend 2 mana every turn to be able to attack with. That's so bizarre. It's so strange. Like, did they think Inspire was like people want a hero power? Like, Inspire, when done well, incentivize people to hero power for something fun or cool or additional happening. In this card, it's just attacks. Like, you have to hero power to be able to play the game as normal. It's not like you get something fun added to your hand, right? Like, if you want to talk about a good Inspire card, look at something like Nexus Champion Sarad or something, right? Where when you Inspire, right, you add a random spell to your hand, right? So this card, similar to Argent Watchman, is kind of weak, right? This is a 5-mana 4/5. Bad stats for cost. And for the high cost of hero powering, which is a whole 2 mana, you only get a random spell to your hand. But at least this card is like, it's fun, it's enticing, it's like, ooh, I do want a random card in my hand, so maybe I will Inspire. Whereas Argent Watchman is like, do you want to use me? Do you want to get anything for the 2 mana you spent to put me in play? Well then, buck up, buddy. Double that mana cost and spend another 2. It's crazy. It's so strange. It's so odd. Like, there's just no reason for that to have such bad stats for that tax to be applied. Like, Nexus Champion Sarad, people love this card. Even if it's weak competitively, they love it. It's super fun. It's a great way to do Inspire. All these other cards, you're getting value in your hand, you're buffing your minions, you're summoning minions, like, they're doing something. And then this one's just like, can't attack unless you hero power. Like, that's it. That's the whole upside. That's what they thought of for this card. What are we talking about? What are we doing? Actually crazy. Super bonkers. I mean, this card is atrocious. And I think that's why. Like, it's too specific. It's too weak for what it's trying to do. And it sadly fits on this list and is just really uninspiring. Last on our list, we have Furnace Fire Colossus. Battlecry, discard all weapons from your hand and gain their stats. So, like, theoretically, if you were to have even a few weapons, like, say you got a couple of Fiery War Axes in your hand, 3 attack, 2 durability Fiery War Axe. You discard 2 of those, you're adding 6 attack and 4 health to the 6/6. So you're getting a 6-mana 12/10, which is big. That's a big deal. Except just playing big stats has never been good in Hearthstone because of cards like Shadow or Death, or just like a Noyotron, you know, like, or any of the other cards that exist. Maybe Glacial Shard says hello. This is Knights of the Frozen Throne, so maybe we should find an example of a card that existed back then, shall we? Because surely this card must have been the nuts when it came out. Obviously, in Hearthstone, there are a lot of cards that discard cards. That's like a whole like deck theme in Warlock, for example. Right? But this card is a neutral card, right? So you could play it in Rogue, Paladin, Warrior, you know, the weapon classes at the time and just kind of in general. I mean, Hunter has a bunch of weapons, as does Demon Hunter now, right? Death Knight also. But like at the time, it was kind of those three. But you have to like, you only ever have like on average 4 to 5 cards in your hand in Hearthstone. Like you have to draw this and draw weapons. Like it's such a weird thing. It's not like discard cards. This would be kind of an interesting big bomb if it was just like discard a few cards in your hand and gain their stats. Just like whatever they were, like just non-minion, non-spells. Just whatever non-spells you have, just like discard 3 cards. Discard 3 non-spell cards from your hand maybe. Like that'd be kind of interesting where it's a big bomb that's always active. Maybe then it's fine, but it's so overly specific because it's not good enough to warrant putting more weapons in your deck, which means it's just like doesn't do anything. Like that's the big problem with cards on this list for the most part, right? They're so overly or oddly specific that it ultimately just ends up being a 6-mana 6/6 with no battle cry. And also getting the stats is often probably just worse than having the weapon. Like if this was a 6-mana 6/6 that was like battle cry, equip a random weapon from your hand, maybe the card's nuts, right? Because you're cheating mana instead of like throwing away value for stats that are just gonna die or get frozen or like get blocked by taunt. Like such a weird card. And it's an undead. Like I guess that happened retroactively, probably, right? Because they did that where they added a bunch of undead to old things. But this is just such a weird card. It's bad, it's weak, and it's just super odd. So it's perfect for a list of overly specific Hearthstone cards. This is obviously a video where I could have talked about like 100 Hearthstone cards, right? There's probably a lot of very weird, very overly specific Hearthstone cards. So if you want this to be a series, leave a comment for cards you'd like for me to talk about in the future. And don't forget to subscribe.